Welcome back to Shadow of the Puppet. This is the continuation of the previous episode. If you haven't heard it yet, we highly recommend you go back and listen, because what happens next won't make sense without it. Shadow of the Puppet, Episode 5, The Puppet Network. The news said it was over. Julian Matheson, the madman who turned girls into dolls, was dead. Shot twice. Buried quietly. No press release. Authorities called it an isolated psychotic incident. But Detective Elias Dravik knew better, because he saw the box. That wooden box, hidden deep in the caves beneath the altar, lined with silk, filled with half-finished puppets, each with a human face sketched beside it. Names, dates, ages. And one of those faces was his. Another? A girl who had gone missing 6 months ago. In Poland. Another? From Germany. Another? Slovakia. They weren't just girls Julian had seen. They were girls someone had prepared, mapped, tagged, measured. This wasn't obsession, it was supply. Elias hadn't slept since the cave. He sat in his flat with the lights off, a bottle of whiskey untouched beside him, listening to the tape over and over. The one Julian left behind. Not the wedding tape. The one the lab techs recovered from the destroyed puppet. Hidden inside its torso, embedded in a micro recorder behind the stuffing. It played Julian's voice, clear, calm, almost rehearsed. You thought it was just me, but I was the last string, not the first. They found me, trained me, gave me my first bride. Elias clenched his fists. They called themselves the theater. They said love is performance. They showed me how to write vows in blood, how to preserve silence, how to sow stillness. A pause. I wasn't the first puppet. I was the one who learned to move. 3 days later, Interpol flagged an alert. A child's body had been found in Vienna, laid out in a fountain. White dress, hands folded, face covered with soft wax, lips painted red in a permanent smile, pinned to her chest, a ticket. Admit one, the Theater of Eternal Brides, and a name, Julian Matheson, scribbled beneath. But Julian was dead. Elias stared at the photo, heart pounding. Julian hadn't lied. There were more. The box recovered from the cave was sent forensics. Inside the lid, written in smudged ink, were 4 words. Property of the theater. Who was the theater? A cult? A trafficking ring? A network of sadists? Elias started digging. He went back to Julian's hospital files, combed through decades of psychiatric notes. Then, buried deep in a transfer log, he found it. Patient 0. Before Julian, there was another child, name redacted, gender unknown. All that remained was a nickname. The playwright. Records said the playwright had been transferred out of Norway, but the trail went cold in 1987, until Elias got a call. It came from a blocked number. Again. He almost didn't answer, but when he did, there was no breathing, no threat, just a voice. Childlike. Hollow. Speaking with calm clarity, like someone reciting a bedtime story. The curtain is rising, Elias. You thought you ended the play, but you only shot the actor. The director is still here. Click. He knew he was being watched. He knew that from the moment Isabella whispered, he wasn't alone. Everything had changed. This wasn't a manhunt anymore. This was a performance, a scripted one. And someone, somewhere, was still writing it. Elias received a package at the station. No sender. Inside, a map of 5 cities, circled in red. Bergen, Vienna, Krakow, Bratislava, Florence, a blood-stained stage curtain scrap, and one final note. Act 2 begins soon. Are you ready, Elias? Because this time you're on stage. Shadow of the Puppet. Episode 6, The Playwright. Darkness doesn't always fall from the sky. Sometimes it rises, from old records, torn files, and the corners of memory no one dares open. Elias Dravik had seen death. He had hunted monsters. He had pulled the thread from Julian's twisted story until it snapped. But now he realized Julian was never the beginning. He was the opening act. The package that arrived that morning didn't explode. It didn't bleed. It whispered. 5 cities circled on a worn paper map. 5 red dots, like surgical incisions across Europe. Bergen, Vienna, Krakow, Bratislava, Florence. In the center, drawn with a child's crayon hand, The Theater of Eternal Brides, Season 2. And at the bottom, in a script that was too elegant to be Julian's, "Come find me, Elias. Sincerely, the playwright." He started with Vienna, where the latest body was found, 12-year-old Mela Roth, last seen at a ballet camp, laid in the center of a public fountain, fully dressed, waxed lips, fingers painted white, and a tiny voice recorder stitched inside her dress. The message? "I always wanted to be a princess. He said I could be his queen if I just stayed quiet." The voice was real, hers, and whoever recorded it had time, access, control. Vienna police dismissed the case as a psychotic copycat. But Elias noticed something in the security footage the others missed. A tall woman in a stage manager's coat, clipboard in hand, face covered with a scarf, entering the theater 24 hours before the murder. Not suspicious, until he enhanced the footage. Around her neck, a puppet string necklace made of red thread. He chased her trail to Krakow. Too late. Another girl gone. This one, never found. Only a puppet left behind, wearing a nun's habit, and a name tag. Mary, age 9. No missing persons report matched, because the girl wasn't from Krakow. She was from an orphanage in Slovakia. Elias arrived in Bratislava with no backup, no agency support. He was off-grid, alone. He posed as a journalist researching cultural loss in institutional homes. But what he found inside St. Petra's orphanage stopped his heart. In the records room, among faded files and burned ledgers, one folder had been removed just last week. The name? Lilian Drevik, his sister. The sister his parents told him had died at birth. The one who never existed in his memory, until now. He stared at the empty file. One photo remained, taped to the back cover. A young girl, age 8, red hair, wide eyes, a doll in her hands, and standing behind her, in a black coat, not Julian, a man, tall, bald, with a paper mask over his face, the kind worn by stage actors in rehearsal. On the back of the photo, the playwright, with his first script. Elias left the orphanage, mind spinning. His entire life, every case, every thread, might have been part of someone else's story, a story written for him. He returned to his hotel, turned on the bathroom light, and froze. On the mirror, written in red lipstick, Act 3, Family Reunion, See you in Florence. And sitting on the sink, a doll, wearing a red scarf, with his mother's face. Shadow of the Puppet, Episode 7, Florence, the theater rehearsal. Florence was supposed to be beautiful, but for Elias Drevik it reeked of old ghosts and rotting silk. The plane touched down just after sunset. The sky over Italy was painted in soft reds, but his mind was black. The photo of a young girl labeled Lilian Drevik, taken in a Slovak orphanage. The name, his sister, the doll, wearing his mother's face. The mirror message, Act 3, Family Reunion, See you in Florence. He didn't check into a hotel. He didn't sleep. He went straight to the location marked on the back of the photo. Teatro Maledetto, an old abandoned stage on the edge of the Arno, shut down in the 1960s after a fire killed 12 performers during a wedding-themed opera. Locals whispered about it. They said actors still performed there at night, without skin. By 2 a.m., Elias stood at its gates. Chains hung broken, doors ajar. A faint light flickered inside. And music, not classical, a child's humming, off tune, repeating the same 5 notes. He stepped in. The air smelled like melted wax and dried roses, and on the main stage, a woman stood in a white veil, still, like a statue. He approached. "Claire?" he whispered. "Lillian?" The woman turned. It was neither. She was alive, barely, mouth sewn shut, eyes wide, her arms wrapped in red ribbon, a doll strapped to her chest like a baby, and behind her, slow applause. Clap, clap, clap. From the darkness, a spotlight flared, and a figure stepped forward, wearing a full white mask, long black gloves, and a tailored coat stained with dried blood. "Welcome, Elias," the voice said, calm, deep, smiling. "We've been waiting for you." The man removed the mask, and Elias froze. It was his father, or someone wearing his father's face. "No, you're dead." "No," the man smiled. "He is dead, but I raised you." "What? What are you talking about? Do you think you chose this path? You were the final script, Elias, the perfect lead." He walked toward Elias, slow, elegant, theatrical. "Julian was my prodigy, but unstable. You're patient, calculated, devastated, a tragedy-turned hunter." "You killed Claire?" She volunteered, not knowingly, of course, but she smiled at a boy. "That's all it takes, remember?" Elias drew his gun. "Where is Lillian?" The man only tilted his head. "She never left the stage." He pointed to the ceiling. Elias looked up. There, suspended above the audience seats, hanging from a rigged puppet line, was a girl. Red hair, eyes sewn open, hands holding a script. Lillian, dead, frozen in mid-performance. The rage was sudden, animal. Elias fired, once, twice, straight into the man's chest. He stumbled, but didn't fall. He laughed. "Brilliant, just as I wrote. You're not God." "No, I'm the playwright." He stepped backward into the shadows and vanished behind the stage. Elias tried to chase, but the lights went out. The entire theater fell silent. Then the speakers crackled, 100 child voices whispering, "Bride, groom, curtain, blood." Then silence. Then a click. A projector turned on behind Elias. Old footage of Elias as a child, playing with a doll, and someone filming, zooming in, breathing. Elias turned off the tape. He knew now, this wasn't about Julian, not about the brides. This was about him. He was the story. He was the finale. Shadow of the Puppet. Episode 8. The Final Script. The morning light over Florence didn't feel warm. It felt like the last light Elias Drevick might ever see. He stood outside the burned shell of Teatro Maledetto, eyes still fixed on the ceiling image that wouldn't leave his mind. Lillian, hung like a marionette, her hands sewn around a script she never read. And the man with his father's face? The playwright. He wasn't just behind the murders. He wasn't just guiding Julian. He had been watching Elias his entire life. Every case, every clue, every corpse, all rehearsed, all written. Elias drove north. No plan, no backup, no agency would believe him now. They already closed the theater case. Psychopath down, victims buried, justice served. But Elias had one lead. Inside the theater, after the lights had gone out, he had found a note, taped to the back of the last projector reel. Not typed, not printed, handwritten. "If you're ready for truth, come home." Signed with a symbol. He knew what it meant. Home wasn't Bergen. It wasn't any city. It was a house buried in the mountains, one he hadn't seen since he was 6. His father's cabin near the Norway-Sweden border, a place forgotten by maps, where the roads ended and the forests swallowed names. He reached it at dusk. It looked untouched, still held the shape of childhood. Same chimney, same door, same wind chimes made of spoons and wire. But the swing out front? It moved on its own, swaying gently, back and forth, like a hand saying, "Come closer." He entered with his gun drawn. The house smelled like old paper and gasoline. The walls were covered in pages, real, aged, yellowing script paper, each one numbered, each one typed. And on every single page, one name appeared over and over. Elias. Says nothing. Stares at the body. Shakes. Breathe. Shoots. Fails. Bleeds. Screams. It was his life, typed before it happened. At the fireplace, he found a single chair, and in it, the playwright, still masked, still wearing gloves, but this time, no performance. He stood slowly. "I'm glad you made it," he said. "Most characters die before they read the last page." Elias raised his gun. "Who are you?" The playwright stepped into the firelight. He removed the mask. The face beneath it was his own, a perfect copy, a mirror, but older, more tired, more broken. "Impossible," Elias whispered. "You said you wanted truth. You're not real." "I'm your story, Elias. I'm what happens when you don't die in Florence, when you stay in the cave, when you let the madness win." Elias's hands trembled. His finger twitched on the trigger. "This is some theater trick." "No," the figure whispered. "This is the final script." He held up a red-bound book. Elias stepped closer. On the cover, Shadow of the Puppet, written by Elias Drevik. "You've been performing from the beginning, Elias. You played the cop, the avenger, the brother. But deep down, you were always meant to be one thing." He opened the book. Page 1, Act 1, The Puppet Awakens. Page 50, Act 3, The Brother Breaks. Page 99, Final Act, The Writer Becomes the Playwright. Elias dropped the gun. He fell to his knees. "No, this isn't me. I'm not you. I'm not him. You will be. Unless what? You burn it." He pointed to the book, and beside it, a can of kerosene. "Burn the script, burn the name, or take the pen, and write the next act." Elias picked up the book, pages shaking. Inside were scenes yet to come. Murders, brides, children, a new puppet master, a new legacy. And at the very end, scrawled in his own handwriting, "Curtain never falls." He poured the kerosene, lit a match, and watched the pages curl into flame. The fire took the house, the name, the future, and maybe the madness. He was found 2 days later, wandering the edge of the woods, clothes burned, book gone. When asked what happened, he only said, "The theater's closed." But as he left the hospital, a little girl passed him in the hallway. She smiled, offered him a doll, and whispered, "He said you'd come back someday." And that was the end of Season 1 of Shadow of the Puppet. But don't let your guard down just yet. The shadows are still watching. A darker, more twisted tale awaits in Season 2. Until then, stay safe. And remember, the puppet's story is far from over.